Today, we're going to talk about an epic collapse, something of big proportions, and it has to do with an American made brand that's been around for decades and generations in Tops. And the whole card industry, which is now kind of controlled by two companies, as you know, Fanatics and Collectors, well, they're going to run things into the ground. So today, we're going to use some game theory, talk about their strategies, talk about why it won't work. But I do think the beginning is very important to start with some history or something that, you might know all this, you might remember all this, but it's important to lay the foundation so the rest of the lesson, kind of makes sense and hits the way it needs to hit. So right now we have two companies in the industry that have taken over. And Fanatics clearly is one, and yes, the other one. They own PSA, and basically every other grading company at this point is Collectors. So let's just focus on Fanatics first. We'll break down in a couple minutes what they've done over the past 4 or 5 years, and then we'll do the same with Collectors and we'll move forward. But it's very important to hit the back first so you can see what these companies have done, what they have in common, and it's not a mistake that they made some of these same moves. So back in 2021, Fanatics does something prior to buying Tops that was very smart, a good business move. Now, what they've done with it since, I can't say the same, but they basically got the licenses to MLB, NFL, and the NBA. Okay, so now that you can see the NFL and NBA licenses just starting up, and they've had MLB now for quite a while. Now, in 2022 is when they went ahead, early 2022, is they buy Tops, and they bought Tops possibly for a deal. None of us will ever know, but they got the licenses first, and Tops couldn't print baseball cards anymore. So they were left pigeonholed. And so after they got these licenses, they went ahead and said, hey, let's buy Tops. And you've just recently seen Panini's licenses run out. Okay, not only this, they decided, hey, after they bought, they decided they were going to come up with a new company or a new division of their company. So this has not been around forever. It's called Fanatics Collectibles. Okay, so they build this on top of acquiring all these licenses. And this division handles all the collectibles, cards, and all. And after that, what did this company do? Well, they went ahead and Tops bought PWCC. PWCC was then kind of integrated and lost into Fanatics Collect. So Fanatics Collect, they're selling singles, and you could buy from there, sell from there. And they also have Fanatics Live, which is now going to be sucked in all into Fanatics Collect. So Fanatics Live, they came out with their own breaking platform. So now you can see they have an auction house. They have all the licenses. They own Tops. They bought an auction house here, and maybe one with a checkered past as well. And then you have, this part of the business that is where I think they want people to go and buy and sell cards. Now, if we look at more so, they didn't stop. I mean, and you could, dare I say, call it a monopoly, because if you want any of these, WWE, F1, certain soccer, or the big 3 major sports in America, you have to buy Tops Fanatics product. There's no other option. That's the only option you have at this point. And finally, what all this led to, and we'll definitely get into this more, but I think it's kind of a hot button issue right now, and we'll use this color here to make it stand out, but allocation has changed tremendously with all these moves, and we see it right now, right here. And we'll get into that here shortly. I want to talk about that quite a bit. But before we do that, let's make sure we go over to Collectors. So Collectors owns PSA. Okay, so for a long time, this was a publicly traded company. But what happened in 2021, the same exact time Fanatics brings private equity into sports cards for the first time, well, what happened was they bought collectors, a group of private equity led by Nat Turner. So we have Nat, we have Steve Cohen, who you've heard that name, owner of the Mets, and then I believe D1 Capital. Okay, so this is who now turned collectors from a publicly traded company into more private equity. And this is something now we're seeing just in the last few years, and that's why we've seen this huge change, is, well, private equity moved in and changed the game. When that happened, no longer, they bought it for $700 million. So when these two things happened, that changed everything. And I want to go back to 2021 and 2022, because that is when this private equity saw, oh my goodness, there is a big field, a big opportunity we need to get into. And so that's what they did, and they expected, and this really should be 2020, the boom of 2020 and 2021, they saw these numbers and they got in expecting those numbers to stay. And what happened in 2022, 23, 24, a big spike down, a huge spike down, especially in singles prices, especially for flippers. But come 2025, something changed with the buyback program, with other things by collectors here that really changed the game. So if we go back to collectors before we move on, they go on to buy, can you believe it, an auction house. Which auction house? Golden Auctions. Now that changes hands. They make a trade later on, but it's not a mistake that both companies went ahead early on. This was a strategy that they used, was to get an auction house and make sure they're controlling from top to bottom vertical integration right here. And if we continue on with this, they went ahead and around the same time, they bought What A Games. And What A Games is one of the biggest video game grading companies, and now Collectors owns it. So now Collectors has PSA, the biggest card grading company, and What Up, pretty much the biggest video grading company. And then they buy Card Ladder. Okay, and Card Ladder now, well, this company has a way to track some sales and data points. And well, you better believe PSA now has a way to track data points and know it all. And then, just like we really have no options over here, well, in the last couple years, Collectors has left us no options because they went ahead and they bought SGC. Okay, this company I don't believe anymore, but CSG was dissolved into Collectors and PSA. And then just more recently, we all know that they bought Beckett. So what you're seeing here is an absolute industry. This has nothing to do with the hobby. This is an industry. They have to make the boardroom meetings. They have to continue to show growth and profit no matter, because lots of money moved in. Okay, now the question is why? And more so before we get, we know why, but I think it's important to talk about the old. All right, so I think it's important to talk about the old and the new. So when we talk about the old world, old world here was a hobby. And the hobby consisted of a few things. Okay, and on the other side, what it's turned into is an industry. And the industry is now taken over by a few things. And this old hobby that we remember has now turned into an industry. Okay, so what makes up the hobby? The hobby, the number one, the biggest source, the biggest thing you would think of when you thought about sports cards in the hobby, what was your hobby shop? It was your local card shop. Okay, that was a big piece of the hobby. You didn't go and say, I'm going to go to the Top Shop, I'm going to go buy Fanatics product. You were going to spend some time at your local card shop and whatever stuff they had there, and that just that nostalgia, the smell, that was the hobby card shop. Okay, so what else made up the hobby? Well, the hobby has a community. And now, instead of seeing that community, what you see is sales, 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 sales. Buy, buy, buy. Look at this huge hit, come break. And so instead of, community really being highlighted, it's almost pushed to the side because the whatnot breakers want to make their money. The big breakers need to make their money. And so why they make you feel like it's community, really, they're pushing you sales. And that's just what's going on. And you also had, the hobby was heavily built on collectors. And I'm not talking about the company. Okay, and what did collectors do? Well, set building was a thing. Set building definitely was a big part of the hobby. Now nobody really wants sets. Nobody's completing sets, or few of us are going for sets. What do you want, a rainbow? But no one's set building, and that was a huge part. And when I say no one, the majority is not set building. This newer stuff isn't made to build sets. It is made to sell more shiny product because it's an industry. And I would say the last couple things that were a part of the hobby, well, it wasn't one company. You could choose Beckett, you could choose PSA, you could choose CGC, but grading more towards the end, before the industry took over, grading was still somewhat part of the hobby. But oftentimes you'd go into the shop and you'd be buying raw cards. There'd be a lot of raw cards. You'd be looking through boxes of raw cards. Now, what's changed? What has turn this into an industry? Well, you just saw that in the previous, Fanatics is running the show. Okay, and the other company that's turned into an industry is collectors and all that private equity money. Yes. Okay, so now we have Fanatics, collectors, private equity, and it doesn't end there, because instead of shops and the community, what's happened is there's these auction houses that have moved in and become a big part of the industry. And we know that their terms of service are not looking out for the buyer. We know their terms of service are not looking out for what the hobby is. It's looking out for, well, money. That's what all this industry is based on. Over $1 billion spent to buy these two companies. And so, this has turned from what we all loved, a hobby, into these top companies needing to show profit, needing to continue to grow and look like the sky is the limit. And the final thing you'll see that's really changed in the past 5 or 6 years alongside this, and Fanatics seems to be, and we'll get into it here in a minute, is that breakers have now, instead of a true community, instead of a community that's not looking to get you to buy and gamble and open packs, well, it's turned into breakers and breaking. And that, my friends, is the old world, what we knew 7, 8 years ago, where stuff was still affordable. People were buying it for fun, as entertainment. Instead, when you're buying it, it's not quite entertainment, it's gambling. And sure, gambling is a form of entertainment, but the prices that have been put on this, you could look at the hobby where in, let's say, 2016, Chrome would sell for, I don't know, was Topps Chrome Football a thing in 2016? Well, let's just say maybe. I'd have to look that up. But you could be buying these boxes for $150 max. And now that same box that they're coming out with is $1,200. So you see the difference in price and in the game you're playing, where this was a hobby. This has now been manipulated by an industry, and this is going to collapse. It won't stay, and let me lay that out why. Okay, so if we lay out why, well, we need to move to their strategy. So we're going to go over the strategy, we're going to go over the results of this strategy, and then how I foresee the collapse and the conclusion of this all. So what we have here is we have Fanatics. And Fanatics has made it very clear recently that they want to use large breakers. Okay, they want to use a few selected large breakers. Now, why do they want to do that? Well, there's a couple reasons. Okay, selected. There is definitely a couple reasons why. Their strategy here. So one reason, well, they want to fractionalize boxes, right? So instead of one person buying that $300 box, you have 30 people buying in for, I don't know, $30, and it changes it to $900. So now you could see what their mind is thinking. We can 3x the amount we sell this thing for. We can sell it for far more if we don't sell it as a single hobby box, if we fractionalize it. And if we fractionalize it, this product sells for a ton more. And everyone still gets a product. Everyone still gets something. The problem with fractionalized breaking, or breaking in general, is what they're selling is at best 3 winners in that break and 27 losers. And so at least when you buy a hobby box, you yourself are either gonna hit or not hit, or maybe break even. But here you're ending up with 27, sometimes more, big losers. Nobody wanted the 900. What is the box return? 200 or 300. And we all know that at this point, unless you hit the big chase, crazy mathematical hit. The other reason they are using these breakers is because marketing. When I buy a hobby box and open it at home, not on camera, that doesn't get out to the world. But when they do this through their selected breakers, any product they give them, which apparently, if this gold medallion thing's real and there's $150,000 they're paying just a month just to get the product, well, these people are going to get what we've seen: a lot of one-on-ones, a lot of huge cards. And those guys, well, those are their team that is a sales team. Then you see how Grant does it, going crazy, or We the Hobby going crazy, or Filth Bomb selling some sort of gambling and chase. And so, they can turn that into and what they've turned it into, it's right in front of our eyes, is a marketing campaign. They've turned this whole thing, and that is why, in my opinion, why they're going, and I think this will backfire. You're going to make a lot of angry people, and now they want to start using, we can even throw another one, instead of using their longtime people that have done business with them, card shops, online sales, breakers. Instead, they want their few select breakers to open the product. And what you're seeing now is they're targeting athletes, right? Well, athletes are higher name. They have more exposure. They have some authority or clout to sell. So athletes is where they're going next. And this is going to cut out, well, they don't seem to care, but longtime shops, the hobby, what the hobby was built on. The longtime shops no more. Non-selected breakers. It's cutting them out. And so what you have here is Fanatics is starting a war. They don't realize it, or they didn't understand, and maybe they do and they just don't care, and their business strategy is to weed this out. But they want this. They 100%, because of the box prices you see, it is very obvious to see this is what they want. And what you'll also see is Fanatics is kind of using blowout. And maybe you all knew this through research. It's a little more new to me, but David Adams and blowout are going to set the price. All right. So if they have the new Hobby Tops Chrome football product, well, at first they set it at $850, and second wave came out a lot higher, but they set it at $850. So now you have your shops that are waiting to see what these guys are going to sell the product for. Now, why? Well, they have all the product. They're distributing this product. They'll even buy it from people so they can sell more. But what's happening here is the shop has to wait. The shop has to wait for David Adams, because if the shop decides, we're going to list our product early at 500, what's going to happen is something called scalpers. And so this is what, and from the hobby, it moved to an industry. And because there's big money now involved, we have scalpers and we have flippers, and all they're going to do, they don't want the product. They don't want to open it. They know that they're better not opening it. They know for them, hey, instead of opening it, it's not worth the price of $850. It's not worth the price of $1,500. Where's that value? Now, if you divide it by 30, okay, now you're starting to get a little closer to people making sense, but only if you want to break. They don't want you, it seems, to open a box. But why do they have to wait? Well, because then the scalper and the flipper is going to come buy that product for $500, and in an hour, they're going to have sold it for $750, $800, $1,000. And it's just creating not even a middleman, but a third party coming in to hike up prices. So shops are basically forced to use what Blowout and David Adams are doing. Now, what you've seen a couple card shops do with this Tops Chrome is they've opened the wrapper. They have offered this lower price, but so people can't just go scalp it, flip it, break it. They want their customer to get to it, and they're offering you a significant markdown. And hopefully this is the future, but this is not Fanatics has no interest in that because they want to force you, if you want to get in and buy cards, they either want you to buy retail from their retail spots of Dick's, GameStop, and so on, or really they want you to go buy a fractionalized box. That's what this is. You don't get the whole thing anymore. We're not going to let you afford the whole thing anymore. If you want to play, you're going to have to play in a fractionalized world. We can make more money. We can profit more. We're an industry, not a hobby anymore. And we need to get this done so we can show our boardroom we're growing in money. And it doesn't matter. What they're not going to show their boardroom is really the war they're starting between the people that ran and were in the hobby far before Michael Rubin, Mike Mahan, and Fanatics or Nat Turner ever took over. So now let's move to PSA. PSA did something very similar. So if we go over to PSA has basically bought all competition. All right, so they have bought the competition. So Fanatics, they leave you no choice. If you want licensed sports product, you're going to have to buy from Topps and Fanatics. And at this point, if you want to grade your cards, and I guess it's actually collectors up here, you're going to have to use collectors and go through PSA or one of the companies, Beckett, SGC, that they now own. So that is a strategy. It's not coincidence that both these companies that have spent private equity, tons of money, over $1 billion combined, well, they have a similar business strategy. They have a similar model. They're not very far different from the two. And so what do you notice? Well, they control single prices. When you send your card in, that Griffey rookie upper deck, if you get a 10, you struck rich, depending. It's a $4,500 card, and I don't expect it to stay that way. There's just way too many in pop count, and everything's so overinflated and heated right now. But they're controlling single prices, because if you get a 9 on that same card, no, you're not going to buy a new car. You got $300, and maybe you go for dinner. So instead of the price of you earning a car on this, that's the power this company has. When you send your card to them, that card's either going to come back the value of a new car or the value of a dinner. That's a big difference. And so that is the control PSA. And because they own all the companies now, well, that is the power they have. And you're starting to see more and more upcharges. Even with these other companies they've taken over. And, you saw them buy Golden. Now, I think there's been a trade there, and we'll get into that in a minute, but they did take that same strategy. And now the big two that have really changed the game in the past year or two, or really year, is this buyback program. We've seen these singles not hold true value, continue to spike up since the buyback program. Not only that, they now got into consigning. So instead of PSA being this third-party authority that just grades your cards, the industry has now said, that ain't enough. We got to get into the sales part, because where people are selling, that's where the money is. So what did they do? Well, they got the buyback program, they got into consigning, and probably the worst thing they got into was, in my opinion, mystery packs. Graded grails. Is that a flop or not? It sure kind of seems like it. And then more importantly, GameStop, power packs. These are digital, online. And so sometimes when PSA is going to buy back your card, well, you don't know. And it's a big problem that you don't know. And it's unfortunate that we have no control. People say, oh, I'm tired of hearing people whine, or I'm tired of hearing people complain. I'm not whining. I'm not complaining. What I'm doing is breaking down a strategy here that they've used, and it's very manipulative. And when you have two companies that spent more than $1 billion to buy, what is the average human? What can you do? What can you do? You can hold a little picket sign for a day. There's nothing you can do. There's nothing except continue to talk about it and change the narrative. And they have hundreds of $millions invested in their narrative. And so they are pushing you hard, a narrative they want you to believe and see, instead of telling you what their real strategy is, what they really need to do, and how it's really going to go. That's not what they're going to make you privy to. Okay, and this is junk. What PSA Collectors has done here is basically they have, dare I say, a monopoly on grading, and now they want to get into selling you mystery packs on top of consigning your card, on top of buying back your cards, and they have changed their whole business model from what was the hobby to the industry. This is what happened. This is exactly why it's not the hobby anymore. It is completely an industry. All right, so now we're going to move on to the results. So what is the result of all this? All this happened, and so now let's get into the results with Fanatics. And then we'll get into why it will all collapse, how it will collapse. But Fanatics, well, you know, you're getting an overpriced product. It is overpriced. Okay, now let's move over to Collectors. Collectors is also overpriced. I think when it was a hobby, I don't think. When it was a hobby, you could get $9 grading with Collectors. Now that it's not a hobby, it's almost tripled. And that's the cheapest option for one card. The hobby turned into an industry. So after we look at overpriced, well, they both, especially Fanatics, has a segment of collectors and others that are upset. Okay, you've made a segment of collectors angry, upset, left out in the cold. Now, you won't see that on social media because what you see on social media is the salespeople and the narrative they want you to believe, not what's really happening. And there are a lot of upset customers or collectors. And on top of that, now you have angry partners. Okay, so there's local card shops that have been around 20 years and they can't get allocation. And how do you think that makes them feel when they see all the big new breaking companies, these young men selling a dream? How do you think it makes these partners feel, these card shops or people that broke prior? It doesn't make them feel good. And what I'm understanding recently is some of these people, just like collectors, well, they're getting priced out. Do you know that hobby shops have to pay for their products 3 weeks in advance? I'm going to say that again. Hobby shops have to pay for their product 3 weeks before they ever sell it. But for some reason, breakers, well, they get a 15-day advance. So if that doesn't tell you enough of what Fanatics wants to do here and make sure everyone is breaking and not buying hobby boxes, well, these card shops or some of these other, instead of the selected big breakers, they're priced out. You might start seeing card shops sell to other people, to the Lewis Hamiltons or athletes of the world. Why? Because the guy that's been in for 20 years, owned that shop, he can't afford it anymore. He can't afford the product. He can't afford the 3 weeks in advance. But you know who can? They're big athletes like Tom Brady. And so that's where they're going to go. Now, so you see this. Okay. So Fanatics is also using one other strategy I think we need to get into as a result. And that's where you see people like Jeff and Ryan and Pac-Man and whoever else goes on this list, right? And then you have athletes like Brady. Okay, well, you know, Brady, the athlete didn't, but these guys supposedly built up a big channel. Supposedly built up big social media. You know, I don't know how they did it, if it's fair, if it's not fair. The numbers are super inflated, just like everything else we see. So it's hard to believe and take what they did as truthful and honest. However, what you're seeing is Fanatics is, since the beginning, their strategy has been, let's use these. These guys are doing it on their own. We don't have to set up a division. We don't have to make our own division because these guys are already doing it for us. And now there's a symbiotic relationship because Jeff, Ryan, Pac-Man, Gio, Brady, they all need Fanatics to succeed. They are all incentivized for Fanatics to succeed. And that's another big point here is humans they operate through incentive. And so now what Fanatics has done is they haven't created incentive for the collectors or these other partners. What they've done is create huge incentive for this group to push. And so I use the word shill a lot. A lot of them are shilling up the product, but they're incentivized to do it. So it's up to them if they want to have integrity or not. And be, you know, sometimes your incentive will lead you down a path where you could still operate with some integrity. But them, because Fanatics is doing what they're doing, no, and you see it in their subscriber count or their Instagram numbers. the niche just isn't that big. But they will do whatever they need to do because their full-time business is to make sure this industry, this billion-dollar company succeeds. And it doesn't matter if you're going to make others upset or ruin the hobby. They don't care. And when they first got in, they had no clue. I think at this point, they know what's up. But in the beginning, they had no clue. And look, you have created a monster here that you're going to be disappointed with. That's what you've done. And it's unfortunate, it's greedy, and it's a little bit, not a little bit, it's very misleading. And I'm again, that's fine. They've attached themselves to the billion-dollar company that I think most billion-dollar companies don't look out for you, don't look out for the country, and definitely don't look out for your finances. They want to line their pockets and their boardrooms with more and more money. It's never enough. The other thing you're going to see with both collectors and fanatics is they've left no options. If you want to buy trading cards that are licensed in sports, you go to Fanatics. If you want to grade your card, you're going to be forced pretty much to use collectors. So that's another thing they have in common. This vertical integration, this takeover, they want to control it all. And that's what other business models and corporations have done, is control it all. But this was a hobby, and it wasn't built off Fanatics, and it wasn't built on grading. And I will argue the infrastructure here was not set up properly when all this big private equity, and still not set up properly. It's just set up to manipulate. And they don't want to change that because it's how their business will look and grow and optically look better. But there is a lot of manipulation. And when you're the only person in town, no one gets to see inside. No one gets to see numbers. No one gets to see the back end. That's one thing I'll say about all this. You don't have a clue why they graded your card the way they did. You don't have a clue the back end. You don't have a clue the back end on anything. So be careful with it all. You just don't know. And when you see this huge rise in price, well, why? And everyone has their little reasons why. But more importantly, the industry wants to make sure that happens. The industry needs to make sure that happens. And now you've got a lot of people here who are have decided they were sold a dream, and now they're relying on Fanatics to kill it and crush it. And so they're not going to tell you, or they're not going to play in that world, because it's their whole business. It's what they do day to day, is support and make sure Fanatics is going to win out. The other thing you're going to notice really with both of them is quality control is really terrible on both. Why? Bandai can print great cards, but Topps can't. Why can't we it's 2026, why can't we grade a card consistently? Do they care? If they don't grade your card consistently, you know what a lot of people are going to do? Crack it open and give them more business. And I think that's part of their business model, is even if it's 10 or 20% on a huge company like this, 10% line is the difference between making profit and not. And so they can't make it more strict. They can't figure that out, because when you crack and resubmit, well, that's more revenue for them, and they don't want to lose that revenue. The final thing you see, and we hear it all the time on the live, is customer support for both these companies is atrocious. It's non-existent. They don't want to help you. It costs too much money to help you. So customer support has totally gone down the drain, like a lot of these billion-dollar companies do. And so what's the prediction? What's the conclusion of all this? Well, Fanatics and collectors are starting to see, you see it here right in 2026, more lawsuits. I think just yesterday, Collectors is being sued for having some sort of monopoly. Fanatics is being sued because they can't get their quality control. Those blaster boxes on Topps Chrome said blue fractor, and there was no blue fractor. They didn't put them in any of them. I even heard on these new Topps Chrome boxes, it says one auto in every hobby box, and some of these hobby boxes just have a hit, no auto, and that's not what it says. So we're going to start seeing more lawsuits, and that's going to start changing the narrative of, ooh, everyone get in, to, ooh, this might be a little shady. This might be a little dirty. The other thing you see going on right now, and I don't think you want to admit it to yourself, but there is a huge bubble. So you're seeing it with TCG, you're seeing it with sports cards. what's been created is a huge bubble. And what happens when that bubble pops? There's going to be a lot of people that have lost a lot of money. And that's how they say history doesn't repeat, but it often rhymes. And that's what's happening here. You're seeing something that will take place, the bubble will pop. And a lot of people have been sold a false narrative, a false dream. They put a lot of money there. And what happens when that bubble pops? Well, it is going to lead to a tragic collapse. Fanatics went from being, before it was Tops. Tops was as American as it gets. And what is America now? Well, it's corporate. It doesn't care about the person. You're a number. You're a statistic. How many people can they get breaking? How many people are going to get doing this? They don't give a shit about you. What they care is the bottom dollar, the money. So for these reasons, is why what they've created will not work. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, subscribe if you have not. As always, thank you for watching. Have a great day.
What up, everybody? This is Robert Ory, aka Big Shot Bob, and you're watching Professional Sports Cards. Hey, by the way, go buy my rookie card.